Hello, everybody. Hello, Hapax. Yeah, SDFG. Good to see you. We're going to talk about smiling and feeling good and feeling great and how the Mind Palace technique can help with that. It's helped me in some very big ways. And we'll talk about something in this book that you're going to want to know about that has been very, very useful. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. If you're watching the replay, likewise, if you're new here, get subscribed to this channel. We talk about everything memory improvement, everything to do with the ancient art of memory and the tradition that has been around for thousands of years of just simply taking space and then weaving it together with what's already in our minds so that we can learn and remember faster and do so in a way, ideally, that improves our lives so we can improve the lives of others. And I was at the gym this morning and I saw on the news that there's yet another tragic event where somebody clearly did not have the right stuff in their head, in their mind, and they went and did some bad things. And so you probably know what was going on there. These shootings, are pretty distressing, and they're especially distressing because I remember once upon a time when I was locked up in the mental hospital having to see, when I was there, the Columbine shootings, and I was just like, why are they showing this on the TV when there's this room full of people who have all kinds of similar ideas? And I went to the nursing station and said, you got to shut this down. You got to stop this. And they're like, oh, no, it's all fine. But what I think at the end of the day is that they're probably right. You can't make people overly sensitive to what's going on in the world just because they have mental illnesses and so forth. But as I was watching this in the gym this morning, what the footage was of the most recent shooting were these highways and big trucks. And I just thought, the lives of these people on the highways, I wonder how full they are. I wonder how rich their mental content is as they're driving on these big, large, expansive, vast, empty highways. What do they have going on? How connected with the world are they? And what is going on in the mind of a person who can fill up their bag with weapons and stuff like that and then just go and do this? Like, what's happening there and what could be better? So I thought, we can talk about this. We can talk about how to reduce the mental suffering that goes into that kind of production. And we can do it with the Mind Palace technique. And I think this is the more appropriate use of the word Mind Palace, because I usually prefer Memory Palace. But when we're using memory techniques to reduce suffering, then I think the Mind Palace is maybe a better word there. The click is in the house. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. If you're joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, in the chat, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And we'll talk about how this all works. And it's certainly something that's helped me a lot because I've had very, very compulsive, repetitive thoughts about all kinds of weird stuff in my life. And this has been tremendously useful, these kinds of techniques. So we'll talk about them. And it's essentially just putting better thoughts in your mind, better thoughts in your head. So great to see you here. The click all the way from India. Excellent. Good to know where you're all from. And it is a huge benefit to be able to just take negative thoughts, painful thoughts, things that are harming you, ruining your focus, and being able to just switch to something better on demand, anytime, 24/7. Doesn't matter what it is. I think you'll even find that you dream better if you're able to do this. And one of the things that I've found is that in the years since I started using these techniques that we'll talk about today, I've never really had a nightmare again. I've had one sort of dramatic dream, but it wasn't anything like a nightmare whatsoever. It was very, very powerful. And all you really got to be willing to do to use these techniques is make memory palaces and fill them up, and mind palaces and fill them up with good stuff. And again, we'll talk about a technique from this book that, or a technique this book suggested that you might want to go through. So if you're joining us now, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, and if you're watching the replay, get involved in the discussion below. And thanks everybody for the many great discussions on the replays that have been emerging. Really appreciate that. Love hearing from you, because I know that not everybody can just join us spontaneously on these live streams. But more on a scheduled live stream in a minute. Just so you know, this video is coming up next. Really appreciate everybody who's jumping on the dedicated videos and showing your love for them with your thumbs up and your comments. The next one is Improve Short-Term Memory, the Truth. It's a new playlist that's coming out, so please show your support of that with your thumbs up and your comments, and love to know what you think about the truth about improving your short-term memory. So this video is just a little over 10 minutes. Those eggs are really important, and I hope you enjoy it. Harvinder is here in the house. Namaste. Good to see you, Harvinder, one of our most accomplished and active people in the Magnetic Memory Method Mastermind group. Wonderful. How many dream memory palaces have you excavated thus far? Always hard to keep up with your numbers, but wonderful, wonderful, wonderful to see you here. And about a scheduled live stream, we're going to do one later in September. I don't have all of the mechanics figured out yet, but make sure you go to magneticmerrymethod.com/YT if you haven't already. Take the free course so you're prepared for the Study Hacks course, and information about exactly how this is going to go down is coming. It's going to be, I believe I have it, if memory serves, for the 21st of September, and it's just going to be wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And yeah, it's just clear your calendar for that day. You know what? I better check my memory and see just to make sure that you can clear your calendar. We've got it for 12 p.m., which is noon PST, which is basically Los Angeles time. Yep, my memory serves. The 21st of September. This is a back-to-school special for people, but you really want to make sure that you are on the email list, and you can best get on it by going to magneticmerrymethod.com/YT. And if you don't hear about it, then reach out. Christian is in the house. Good to see you. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Christian, for that brain games. I was going to say brain hacks, but brain games video. Amazing, amazing. Got to get it set up on these live streams as well. I tried to, but there was a little bit of a tech issue. But thanks to everybody who watched that and supported it. It's amazing. You know, we see all the details in the data on the depth of penetration into these videos, so to speak, and that's been a very popular one. Thank you, Christian. I just love that. I love it so much. Sean is in the house from New Jersey. Excellent. Good to see you, Sean. Thanks for being here. Dota is here. Again, Study Hacks, 21st of September, 12 noon PST. Put it on your calendar. I know that'll be early for some people. It's going to be early for me, but you're not going to want to miss this. And no link for you yet, but it's coming. And it's going to be amazing and fun. So, good to see everybody here today. If you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking, how you're feeling. And this whole nonsense of people just reacting to the world is a sign that either they are empty of fulfilling things, or they could be full of fulfilling things at a higher level, so that, you know, we could do something together to reduce some of the suffering in the world. And that would, if there's less suffering in these heads, then there's less suffering that gets expressed outwardly. That almost seems certain to be the case. Mathematically, almost very, very certain. All right. Seize the Moment says, what's the time now? In Australia, it is 11:40 a.m. What's the time where you're at? Seize the Moment. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Lord Fred Plus, love that name. Watching from Dallas, Texas. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, wonderful, wonderful to see you. And again, for those who are not on the email list, make sure you are, so you are notified about Study Hacks. You can get signed up at magneticmerrymethod.com/YT. Now, we're going to talk today about a number of ways to reduce mental suffering with mind palaces. So we're going to start with these very, very wonderful acronyms, and we'll go through them one at a time. Giselle is here from the Philippines. Thanks for being here, Giselle, all the way from the Philippines. Wonderful to have you here today. Thank you for saying hello. Thanks for being here on the Facebook live stream version, and that's just fantastic. Let me know if you're also watching on YouTube. Love to see the the YouTube people, the Facebook people, and wherever else this might be streaming. I have no idea these days where all it goes, but always good to see people from different platforms to let me know that it actually makes sense to have it over there. All right, so we'll start with MOL, which there's a very interesting and powerful scientific study, a series of studies actually. Tim Dalgleish is one of the main dudes behind this. There's a number of people involved in the studies. If you follow the links in the description below this video, you can check out one of the core studies, and then there's a replay of a live stream we did where we read through the entirety of one of them. He uses the term Method of Loci to talk about how that you could link positive memories with a mind palace or a memory palace, and then when you're feeling down, when you're feeling blue, you can just go through that and change your mood. Now, it's just that simple. Like, we don't have to complicate it any more than that. Very, very simple. I would even simplify it because I think he's got it too complex in the way that they did the study. Just take 4 positive memories and stick them in a memory palace. So if you know how to create memory palaces, you're ahead of the game. And so let's just say you've got a square memory palace and you have happy memory number 1. So I've always done some version of this, but never so strategically. And here's the idea. I rarely feel blue or down, but I just maybe started feeling blue and down recently because of thinking about this research, and maybe it's a little bit of self-imposed downness to see if it will work, but it does. And I also react to weather a fair amount, and the weather's been changing, and it's just when I'm a little bit tired, I'll sometimes have more thoughts than I usually do. I am working very much on thought reduction the last couple of years, and it's amazing. I've even had periods where thoughts are gone. Wow, goal reached. Unbelievable. I didn't even think it was going to be possible, but it is. And what ended up happening is that it really works. So just go through this memory palace, and the first one is just this magic show. The actual memory on station 1 in this special memory palace is the magic show I performed with cards for the committee that examined me at my PhD examination. And that was a dramatic event, and I almost don't know how I had the energy to do a full-on magic show, but I did. Anyway, that memory just goes bam, and I just feel instantly better. And it's in a memory palace, so I know where to go, I know what to see, I know, or mentally re-envision, and to make sure that I really inhabit and dive into that memory. And then I just go to the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. But the thing is that really, it's just the first one does the trick. Now, why might that be? Well, I don't know. I'm not a neuroscientist. I've thought of going back to school to get another PhD or even just another MA. That would be my 3rd MA. But I don't think I'm going to. I mean, there's lots of people doing work in this area. Maybe I can just collaborate with them somehow. But I think it must have something to do with chemicals in the brain. So you get some dopamine spike or whatever's going on. And if you make it a habit, then you might get some myelin as well. And you have these opioid receptors that are just, and they bind together with this stuff simply by using your memory. So yeah, 4 memories and fixed, easy. Now you might be wondering, okay, so this is a drawing. Well, what does it look like in the world? Well, this is just a memory palace. I don't know, I haven't been there for years, but this is in Berlin. That's where I used to rehearse, to learn my music, to go out on the stages of Europe and rock and roll. And incidentally, I just finished memorizing another Bach piece, I think. Let me know in the chat, would you be interested in a breakdown of memorizing a Bach piece? This was really challenging, really long, and it's got a twist ending, and so that was quite fun to memorize. So now it's all in my head, and I'd be interested. It's one of those things where you get what you vote for these days. It would be a lot of work to make a dedicated video about memorizing Bach, that's for sure. But anyway, man, is it ever good to have in one's head. So that would be where you'd stick it, right? Just there. Great memory right there. And then, oh, I need another great memory. Bam, right on my bed. And, I think that's not enough. I think I'll go for another one. I'll stick it on the wall, that sort of thing. And it helps that this particular memory palace has a happy set of memories. I mean, I really, really worked hard in that room. I spent hour upon hour noodling on the bass, getting prepared to go on tour, and et cetera, and be prepared in rehearsal rooms, and et cetera. Actually, that poster on the wall behind me was our tour poster. What a tour that was. And but there were some pretty negative memories in that room too, because I was drinking like a fish back then, and this picture has a sort of dark quality to it in some sense. But in any case, the room doesn't seem to matter. Even though the room has some dark memories, it has more powerful memories. We got one vote from Christian. Thank you for that on the Bach. So we'll keep that. We'll keep asking. But yeah, I think it might be a fun one to do, because I've discovered so many interesting things about memorizing music over the years that might be interesting to people. But maybe we got to keep it in the mastermind. If we can only be bothered to have, if only one of us can be bothered to say hell yeah to that. In any case, it's pretty simple, right? Just keep it simple. So my suggestion to you is to make a memory palace, and then put some happy memories in there. And it's just that simple. Just stick them on the stations. Dota says, is it better to put sad image in this image? I don't know why you would put a sad image in a memory palace that's meant to reduce your mental suffering. Let me know more about what you're thinking. And if you're just joining us, hit the thumbs up. Let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. And we'll continue forward. But that's just the very simple thing. If you need the science, the link to the scientific research about why and how this works is down in the description box below this video. I also have included a replay where we read from beginning to end and discussed one of the studies that demonstrates why putting happy memories in memory palaces, linking them together with the method of Loci makes sense, why it works. And it certainly works for me. It works real fast too. So everybody has, I hope everybody has at least one or two good memories. And Goat is in the house. Good to see you, Goat. Thanks for being here today. Shall we move on to another technique? Would you like that? We got one person for Bach. Thank you, Christian. But maybe we get some more votes for the next thing. Maybe we play some Bach. I feel like playing some Bach. You guys only for Christian. We'll play some Bach. Let's see here. Come on, bass. Whoa. Yikes. So, one of the things that we got to talk about, and this is a cool thing too, actually. One of the things you could do is put in your memory palace music that makes you happy. You could have just even the list of the songs that make you happy. That's another idea. So there's a bonus idea for you all. Let's see. Can you hear that? I don't even know if you can hear that. Let me know if you can hear that, because I might need to change the mic around. This is totally spontaneous Baching it up. But the problem with this is, I wonder if I stand, if you could see better. So I've never actually performed this, and that's one of the things that I've learned, is that performing is a different memory issue than memorizing at home, right? So I'll be much more forgiving to myself in mistakes that I make, but nobody wants to listen to a guy make a bunch of mistakes when he's performing, right? Why would they? That would make no sense. But yet there's a memory step, which is being able to perform, right? And performance is its own thing. I mean, I've been on stages all over the place, and I get that from many hours of performing throughout my life. But can you hear this? Let me know. I'm not gonna play it until 2 or 3 people let me know they can actually hear the bass. So Manoj says, so nice. Christian says, performing had more tension, but sheer will can sometimes carry through. Christian says, yes. Okay, so you can hear it. So one of the older pieces, just to warm myself up, that I've had memorized for a long time is wonder if I stand up, it'd be better. Let me see how that looks. Woo! Wow, we got like mechanics here. Well, my head's still going to be cut off. Anyway. Oh. So, a little nervous. I haven't performed bass forever. It would have been 2013 was the last time I ever performed anything. Anyway, that I've had in memory for a while. And that's really weird with my head cut off. Oh, but then we see the ceiling. Oh, it doesn't matter. So that, it's really different to perform. Anyway, this other one that I'm working on, I haven't memorized the whole thing, but it's really fun. Then I'll try to perform the one that I have memorized now totally. So that's just a little noodly thing from Bach. I really like that. But it's interesting. So there's a memory issue, which is that you can remember to play it and you can just noodle by yourself. And then there's like the memory issue of performing. And I have no idea how to actually do memory of performing on live streams. This is really quite interesting. But let's see if I can play the new thing. I don't think I'll be able to get through it without a mistake because I've never actually performed on a live stream, which is its own practice. Good to see you, Maricela. Thank you for being here. And thank you for the kind words, Gota and Dota. Or sorry, Goat and Dota. Great. So let's see if I can get through this. Now, what I really think is interesting, and again, I would point out that this is something that can make you feel really happy if you have it in a memory palace, which I do, is you can just go into the bliss of music. It doesn't have to be a memory of an event in your happy memory palace. It can also be a memory of music. So what's neat about memorizing music is you can actually play it mentally, right? And you don't have to have the instrument. And you can actually have the instrument in a ghost-like manner in your hands and actually, play in the air. And it would be like air guitar, except for you wouldn't be air guitaring with no knowledge, you would actually play. So let's see here. No, I screwed it up. Let me start again. Here's the thing. I usually play with my eyes closed, so I don't distract myself. Oh, I screwed it up there. How does that go? Anyway, where was I? Ah. Oh. No. What is that chord? So that's painfully embarrassing. I can't remember the chord, but anyway. I remember that chord. So obviously there's a lot of performance memory that needs to be worked on, but isn't that fun? Whatever. It's a nice ending, but it's very difficult. Sorry, my bass is fuzzing out too. Anyway, as I say, there's a difference between the memorization of the music and then the memorization of how to perform it, which I obviously probably shouldn't be performing a damn thing without having practiced performing, right? Which is normally how that it goes. But here's the thing that I've noticed is that there's two different kinds of memorization. So I hope that you didn't find that too painful, but that's where I'm at with Bach. I just finished memorizing that. It's quite long, it's quite complex, and there's one chord that I forgot. And here's why I forgot it. Because I didn't memorize the actual name of the chord. So one of the things that I'll talk about when I do the dedicated video on Bach is that I think that the way that I can get performance ready with it is to actually write it out from memory. Because I made some mistakes there and I was able to find my way back. But that chord I can't find because I haven't written it out from memory. And so I sort of don't have a clear idea of where it is in the logic of the piece, which is annoying. And I think that will solve it. Anyway, the whole point is I feel a lot of joy because I have, even with the mistakes in performance, I have the music in my head. I have that whole thing in my head to play anytime, any place. And it's in a memory palace. And so even though it's not in my motor memory, far from it, it's now part of the neurochemistry, right? So that's kind of cool. Anyway, thank you for your kind words about that complete butchery of poor old Bach. But I don't think he's rolling in his grave anytime soon. Okay. And then the thing that's cool too about it is that music, as Christian is pointing out, helps us study. And the neat thing is when you have music inside you, when you have it in your brain, you can draw upon it as an alternative to interrupting thoughts that interrupt you. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, anyway, one thing I have to cover with the dedicated video is the difference between memory of the music and memory that is going to come into play when you perform. Because one of the things that I learned when I played music as a musician live was that you really got to play like 2 to 5 shows before you're really in the stream of things, because you've got to learn how to play the music live. And then you always have this new learning, because every place is going to sound different that you perform. There's going to be a different energy with the different people there, and so on and so on and so on. So it's very, very interesting. And I don't know how you ultimately ever do it, but one of the things we used to do is we would have a click track that that we could sort of refer to, and that was always helpful, even when performing, because sometimes you can't hear the rest of your band, which is very, very frustrating and challenging. And you need, if you make a mistake or you fall off or you waver, you need to know how to get back on, even though you're not hearing the rest of your band. You might just be hearing the drums, and that's it. You might not even be hearing your own instrument, and you need to get back on. So where I lost that chord there, and this is one thing that I used to do when I would play with a band, is I would write out by hand what it was that the music was. And I found that that was like the number one thing that made me be able to find where I was if I ever lost the path in music. Anyway, that was not the express purpose of today's live stream, but it came to mind. And the whole thing is that music, having so much Bach in my head available on demand, even if I can't, pull off a good show and my bass was strangely distorted. I must have hit a button there at the last minute that gave me some fuzz. But it's wonderful to have it both, that you can produce it, but also just hear it in your head and follow along and ghost it. So I'd recommend that if you're not a musician now, just become one at whatever level. Learn music, because it's really good for you. And so checking in with our chat. Thank you again, everybody, for your kind words. Lord Fred Plus says, LOL, your face, good job. Yeah, I have no idea. But I know that I have to, in order to concentrate on music, I have to almost always play with my eyes closed. It's the weirdest thing. I don't know exactly why, but I've always been an eyes closed kind of guy, and I'm sure that makes my face look very, very strange. But here's the thing. I think that the evil Dr. Forget got hold of me really just once. I made some technical slips, but that chord is annoying me, and I'm going to beat him. I'm going to beat him. The evil Dr. Forget will not hold on to that chord for long. Yeah, anyway, I think I know what it is now. But that's another thing about the fretboard and music, is I can picture in the fretboard, and I was, yeah, okay. Anyway, Christian says, I listened to the Clockwork Orange soundtrack on repeat to complete a semester of work in a week of spring break before graduating. Sticks with me today. That's great, yeah. That is a great soundtrack. Some of the electronics that they brought to the music is just unbelievable as well. It's like drummers and their tongues out. Yeah, drummers certainly can have some weird facial expressions. I'm never going to watch this live stream. I don't want to know how badly I butchered that. But the point is not, again, to somehow demonstrate memory of performance, but rather just to show that memorizing music is possible, and it's fun, and it's elucidating, it's enlightening, and it's a resource that's not unlike an actual memory. And so, one of the cool things that I couldn't have anticipated is Christian saying, like, I listened to the Clockwork Orange soundtrack. And so I remember listening to the Clockwork Orange soundtrack like crazy too. And you've just helped me recover another memory palace, because when we put out the new series, the new playlist on improving short-term memory, I mentioned a guy, my dad's friend Roy, and Roy had a daughter, and she showed us when we were way too young to ever see such a movie, Clockwork Orange. And I'm really glad that I saw it when I was in high school, or elementary school, better said. But man, that was way too young to be seeing that. But it gave me a flag post for when I saw the novel later, and I read this, and like I used to pretty much know NADSAT as a little language I could use, which is another thing. to think about when you think about language learning, and how that is also a thing to have in your mind to improve your mood potentially, and to have a resource. I don't know if there's much research into it as a mental health thing, but certainly in bilingualism studies, there's a lot of very compelling data that helps us understand that we have better chances to fend off issues with our brains when we can speak more than one language. And so not only do I have a memory palace that Christian is reminding me of seeing Clockwork Orange very young in a particular place, because I remember even she was babysitting us, and it was not at Roy's normal house, but it was also at her place where she was babysitting somebody else at the same time. And so now I have those two places, and now I'm remembering all sorts of stuff about like playing Sega, and my brother and we used to have this battle about whether Sega was better than Nintendo. And he would, every time we had to be babysat or stay at a place, he would always bring his Sega and I'd bring my Nintendo, and we'd have these wars, and it's like Wonder Boy versus Super Mario's. Anyway, the point is that these are just powerful memories that come up, and they're so positive. There's so many things. And Clockwork Orange, having that flag, made me very interested later in life in language, because I remember that bizarre movie with this bizarre, stuff. Naughty, 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 you stinking petitza, or whatever he says there. Yeah, the petitza. I remember that. Let's see. Anyway, thank you for that, Christian. I love that. And I wonder, too, maybe Memorize does have NADSET. That would be hilarious. Come and get one in the Blocos. I remember that one too. All right. So Christian says, we are always harshest on ourselves because we know what it could be. Yeah, that's true. It's interesting. There's lots there. But in any case, for anybody interested, I think it's interesting to think about at least two realms of memory. The memory of the actual composition, then your muscle memory, and then your muscle memory when you practice at home, and your total forgiveness of yourself, as Christian is signaling, versus your absolute lack of forgiveness to yourself when you go to perform. And it's really something where you could create negative memories that you beat yourself up about. But I was lucky. I played with some world-class musicians far ahead of me, which was a great inspiration, and I learned a lot about how to practice from them and how to perform. And I'll never forget the great Alberto Atala saying to me, when you're on stage, if you make a mistake, just get back on the horse, because it's only a mistake if it looks like a mistake, right? So if I were to criticize myself about the performance I just gave, then I probably could have, I was just demonstrating a memory thing, and then getting myself back on track by calling back into where I was in the song. But really, I could practice performing it in a way that if I make mistakes, I just roll past them and somehow riff, because I know where that's placed in the key, and could probably get away with that principle, as I often did on stage. Anyway, there was a time when I would punish myself for mistakes that I made with music, and I have horrible memories, etc., etc. And that's not what we want to do. We actually want to be able to replace any self-punishment, any mental suffering, with positive thoughts as quickly as possible, and place criticism and self-criticism in a context where it's actually useful. So had I actually intended to do a performance today of music, then I might look at it critically, and I might say, yeah, so you obviously need to write down that music by memory because you lost that chord, and that's going to be a great memory exercise to learn it more. And you might want to practice actually improvising through mistakes instead of calling them out as they happen in real time, etc., etc. Anyway, it's a beautiful piece of music, and I hope you hear it from a decent performer one at some point in your life. Dota says, if you want to be a successful person, you should focus on your work as much as possible. I agree. You want to get it into procedural memory, that's for sure. And that's another way of looking at the musical performance thing. Christian says, exactly, people notice an anomaly in the pattern, and the PA system is forgiving. Indeed. It's less forgiving to some instruments than others, but I was watching a documentary about Poison, and what was his name? C.C. DeVille, I think. He made some mistakes that were pretty hard to ignore, but he seemed to have been doing it on purpose. All right, so would you like to go on to the next technique just to catch up with what we were talking about? Very, very simple. Get together 4 positive memories, stick them in a memory palace. The next time you're feeling down, revisit them. And you should be able to turn around that negative mindset. Let me know in the chat if you're ready for the next thing. I'm going to refresh my water here because the next technique is going to involve something I'm going to unpack from this book here that I have a couple caveats around. And let me know in the chat if you're just joining us where you are in the world, what you're doing, what you're thinking. If you have any questions about anything about memory, let me know, and we can catch up with those. And thank you all for being here. Always fun to hang out. Maricela had said, nice music. She's reviewing the masterclass video on index cards now. Excellent, excellent. Dota asked, is it better to play brain games to improve memory? Please respond. Thank you for that question, Dota. Well, it depends on what we're talking about by brain games. So, Christian's here, and I think that he and I would agree that just using memory techniques is a brain game. It's the ultimate brain game. But in terms of the nonsense apps that people are putting together, brain game to do what, right? What's it supposed to do? What is flipping tiles supposed to do? Really, tell me what exactly you expect from flipping tiles. And behind one tile is going to be a flashlight, and behind another tile is going to be a suitcase, and behind another tile is going to be, I don't know, what? Who cares, right? Just some useless stuff. Where in your life do you go out and flip around tiles and then have to remember the locations of flashlights, suitcases, and hats, or whatever it might be behind those tiles? That's a brain game, sure. But what is it helping you do? I think that what it's helping you do is play brain games. Whoop-de-doo. You're great at a brain game. Good for you. Oh, look, we've got this chart readout. Now, some people will swear to the nth degree that and I am always blessed and honored to have the conversations. But people leave in the comments on the YouTube, they're like, why are you so against apps? Why are you so against this? Are you saying this and that about it? I've noticed that my brain and my memory have improved. And I say to them, well, okay, well, how do you know it was the app? How do you know? How do you know? And I'm very open to anybody explaining to me that the brain game was the thing that improved their memory. Just show me why you know that that's what it was. And what else are you doing? What tests have you done? Etc., etc., etc. But just playing some stuff, here's what could be an effect, is taking a break and just letting your mind wander. We know that this can have a huge positive, beneficial effect. But does that mean that that the app has improved your memory? I don't know. But I think one of the points that Christian makes so well in the Brain Games Wrap, which is absolutely incredible, and thanks again to everybody who watched it and did your thumbs up stuff and commented on it. And we're going to be using that a lot in the future. So if you missed it, you'll see it, I think. But I think one of the arguments there is you just don't need the apps to get brain exercise. That thing that I just did playing Bach, unprepared, that was huge brain exercise. Like, we saw Lord Fred there saying, look at your face. Well, those contortions of my face is that I'm working out my brain. Memorizing that whole thing was the best thing. Bach wrote sheet music that I looked at, and then me and my brain and my bass, we got together and we became an app, so to speak. And we just memorized that stuff like it was nothing. And then we put some mustard on it and we eat it, because it's just amazing to have music like that in your head and to be able to do it. So, why do I memorize Bach? Well, partly because it's great mental exercise. It's great memory exercise. And it's just pleasing. It's edifying to be able to play it and to know it and to think about what Bach might have been thinking, what he's doing there, and the sort of programmicity, you're closer to it. Same thing with maybe learning NADSAT or learning any other language. It is the ultimate brain game, because then you're able to actually use it, right? So if the brain game actually translates into something you can do in the real world, either with hand-eye motor coordination that's better, I'm all for it. I mean, I don't have anything against it. It's just I want to know where people think their memory is actually being improved, because chances are it really isn't. But it may be that other things are being improved. I don't know. Anyway, follow your bliss, but just be clear about what it is that you want, and then find processes that actually strengthen the skills in a legitimate way. And I would hazard a guess, and I'm sure that all the evidence in the world in the correctly structured scientific studies would show beyond any reasonable measure of doubt that actually just learning a language is far outpaces the benefits from any app, and just learning a language the way that people learned languages long before they spent hours on this or that goofy software. That, incidentally, software that would remove you from having the positive brain chemicals that come from interacting with other people, the serotonin, the oxytocin, the norepinephrine, etc., that switches on, that help your memory, right? But, I got a new badge on my new little language learning app. Give me a break. That's not learning a language. It has nothing to do with learning a language. It's just farting around on technology and in doing it in a way that dopamine spikes and addicts you more and more and more to bells and whistles and ding, 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 ding. And, we'll show you a bunch of apps. And, by the way, we'll retarget you too, so that we follow you around the internet because we know you downloaded this app. And then whatever. But I'm happy to be corrected. Go ahead, correct me if you actually think that playing on one of those things has improved your memory. Just tell me why you think that it has, and maybe we can come up with an experiment for you that would help us test it a little bit better. I just don't see it happening. I also don't see anybody really showing up to that test, because merely by the way I ask the question already chases them away and they don't answer. All right. Christian says, bring on the next tool of transformation. Maricella says, yes, go to the next techniques. Christian says, the stress of live performance coupled with memory work and physical dexterity. I can't. Where did the rest of this go? Why can't I move this around? There is grand brain game. Yes. So live performance coupled with memory work and physical dexterity is a grand brain game. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe, let me know if you're interested. Maybe I will actually practice performing on live streams. Every live stream, I'll practice performing and see if we can discover together how the brain exercise of playing Bach live actually helps me get better at playing Bach live on live streams. That would be an interesting memory exercise that has a brain exercise element to it. But I want to know if you're interested in that. So let me know in the chat if we get enough people, if we at least hit the 80-20 rule, then maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll even play it again today for those of you who may have missed it. So, Kirigami, good to see you, Kirigami. Thank you for being here. You have a question. How do we develop a logical mind? Great question. That's probably one of the best questions I've had all week. Kirigami, here's an exercise for you to help us actually dive into this at a deeper and higher and more profound level. What is a logical mind to you? Define it, 2 to 3 sentences. What is a logical mind? I know what I would say, but let's see what you would say. What is a logical mind? Now, if you're switched on, you know that I'm already helping you develop a logical mind by asking you to write in there. So start to develop one by 2 to 3 sentences. What is a logical mind? Define it. You don't need to have any training to start to use the powers of logic to develop your logical mind. Just dive in, type. Anybody else can also type. What is your definition of a logical mind? Let's make this a group activity, and let's see the 80-20 rule in effect, or even more sinister levels of it. We shall see. And Christian says, I fall into a pattern of believing I'm learning something when I'm only pretending to learn, such as all of my papers out with books and my wife walks by. Real learning? Maybe. That's interesting. So, Christian, thanks for sharing that, because we all have that. Everybody has that. And just the Bach that I played, like to memorize all that, there were many periods where I actually was just pretending to learn it instead of actually doing what it is that makes you learn it, right? However, it's not always a bad thing necessarily to pretend to learn. But the way that I would suggest that we frame this is that there's a difference between activity and accomplishment. And then there's a difference between activity that is just activity for activity's sake. And then there's activity that leads to accomplishment. And then there's the activity that maintains accomplishment. And probably there's some other degrees. But let's just work with that for now, right? And so if we think about just the Bach experiment, here's an activity that leads to accomplishment. It's called dedicated practice, essentially. So if there's a passage that I need to memorize, we better get the bass back out because this will make a lot more sense if we do. Let's see. Whoa, we're going to break the bass. I really need to think of a live stream setup for basses. But here's what I'll often do when I'm learning. I'll be like, okay, I got to memorize that, right? And then I'll go and play Metallica for an hour, right? That's activity that in no way leads to accomplishment. So I'm just like, too hard. Time for Iron Maiden. Just go do something I know instead of, okay, how am I going to memorize this, right? So now the activity is that I am actually playing music. And I might think of every other song that starts with that note, or I might do whatever, but I will not actually memorize. So what is the activity that creates accomplishment? It's going, okay, D, F, and A, right? And so I might think, okay, so this is D on the A, so I'm going to have Al Pacino and Dracula in a fight, right? And because it's the fifth string, they're going to be in a fight with Sal from Dog Day Afternoon, because 05 is my Sal. And then I'm going to go over here. And so now this is the D string. So Dracula is going to, this is 3. So he's going to be eating a sandwich, which is sandwich. And then now here, this is Grover string, G string. And now this is going to be the sun is burning Grover. Now I just have to tell this little story to myself. Right? And now I've memorized it. Can I get that chord back, though? That's the question. There it is. That's that chord I needed earlier. I found it. All right. So I hope that helps answer the question. But it's the same thing. Sometimes I confuse activity with accomplishment. I might open up a document, and I'll just be, okay, today's time to write. I'm going to write about, I don't know, how to improve your short-term memory. And then I'll sit there, and I will write a story about, I don't know, some guy who needs to replace his brain implant and the evil corporation that, somehow is inserted a secret code inside of his brain implant and they need to intervene on the surgery to stop it or whatever, right? And I'm writing, but the activity is not leading to an accomplishment because I have no plan or strategy to become a fiction author that would warrant the time. But it's still kind of cool, and I'm practicing writing. I'm still getting some edge out of it. But in any case, the activity that actually leads to accomplishment is doing the thing that leads to the outcome, right? And then there's the maintenance of the accomplishment. So I hope that helps out a little bit there. But I think we all have it, and it's just a matter of reasserting what is the thing that does the thing, right? And then in terms of music, again, and dedicated practice, let's say that there's a passage that I keep making a mistake on. Then what I would need to do is actually play that passage. Instead of going to the beginning of the song and starting all over again, play that passage, work out what's wrong there, play the passage with the passage that follows that passage, or the bar that follows the problem bar, and then get that going, loop it, then go to the bar that precedes the problem bar, and then loop that, and then loop all 3 together. So problem bar, following bar, previous bar, loop that together, then go back to the beginning of the song. And usually when I do that, I can just flow through it, and it's not a problem the next time through. And that's the actual work that leads to accomplishment. But sometimes I find that I'm just too much, and I go and play, whatever, and some pop music stuff. That's not particularly challenging. All right, we got a couple more. Anyway, I really appreciate you sharing that, and I just think we all have that. And one of the things that differentiates more successful people from less successful people is the amount that they can just get themselves on the track of the actual activity that leads to accomplishment instead of just activity. And activity can hit the mark or miss the mark and be wildly divergent, right? And so we really need to think about the activity that actually leads to the accomplishment, and then just also accept that we're going to burn out on that and we need other kinds of activity. And that's one of the things that Alex Pang raises so much in the book Rest that I recommend so often. I really got to get him on the podcast, because he talks about how that one of the ways you can get rest is using your skills in a way that doesn't have to do with your work. So I might have poo-pooed myself a little bit there because I'm writing sci-fi stories that I know I'm never going to publish, but I'm actually getting rest according to his theory and his research, because not his theory, but it's also studies that he's drawing upon, because I'm just using a skill that I have, but without the need for an outcome, without it even being linked to an outcome, because the chances are that I'm ever going to go and, publish science fiction novels. I have in the past, but, as an actual going concern at a career level is very, very, very small. So, yeah, it's something to consider, and we just want as much as possible to just have a real sharp, clean focus on activities that actually lead to accomplishments, and be aware in our minds, oh, now I'm in a thing that is not leading to accomplishment. Same thing with language learning, same thing with anything you want to do. Even in memory, it's the same thing. I'll sometimes pick up a book and I'll catch myself in rote learning, and then I'll be just like, but this is just activity with memory. Why am I not encoding this? Why am I not just working on what works? And I think it's just that we have sometimes fatigue. We have focus fatigue or whatever. So just acknowledge it, recognize it, and then get back to business as soon as you can. It's very, very simple. And strangely, we forget the memory techniques. We forget to use them. We just do. Everybody does. I know I've talked to many, many memory competitors, even in competition. They'll forget to use the memory techniques, right? And you just got to practicing, reminding yourself to get back on track and use the stuff. Oh, thank you, Chrome Woman Walking, for yet another super chat. I'm so honored. Thank you. And thank you for supporting this work. I really appreciate it. I don't even know what to say. But wonderful and good to see you. And I look forward to seeing you on the replay. And I hope I don't burn out your ears with all the mistakes I make on Bach, but I think it's for a good purpose. All right. Thank you so much. Very grateful, by the way, because this is what makes this work possible, is people supporting it. So thank you very, very much. Okay, so Dota says left brain equals logic. I don't know if that's true, but maybe. The question is with the left brain, right brain stuff is, if it's true, what changes? If it isn't true, what changes, right? Does the left brain, right brain conversation really lead to stuff? I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Mr. Space is in the house. Good to see you. Thank you so much for being here today. Always good to see you. And Kirigami, picking up with the logic question again, says, a logical mind is a mind that knows how to ask the right kind of question. That's what I believe. Great. So now, if you want to develop a logical mind further, why do you believe that? Why do you believe that that is a sufficient definition of a logical mind? And what do you mean by right kind of question? What could that possibly mean? And what is the evidence that supports the idea that a mind knows what a right question is and can handle the definition of the right question in any given moment so that it is the right question? I'm not disagreeing with you, but what's the evidence? So a logical mind, part of what a logical mind can do is actually put out the evidence, as much of it as possible, that supports the claim, right? And so also you'd want to have some definition there that is logically coherent, that makes sense of what a mind is in the first place. Do you know what a mind is? I'm not sure I do. But if you do, you'd want to logically lay out a definition of what a mind is. You might want to refer to, the ancient Sanskrit tradition of what they call a mind, and counterpose it or compare and contrast it with, I don't know, Descartes, what was it, 1637, I think, the Discourse on Method, if memory serves. Something I memorized recently, that date, if it's correct. I think it is. It must have been 1637. It's weird, though. I would have thought he had appeared before Bruno, but I guess not. But I think it's 1637. Now I'm tempted to go look, but I think that's when his method appears, if memory serves. In any case, you'd want to do that. A logical mind would begin to be able to say, well, according to this tradition, mind means this. According to that tradition, mind means that. According to the current neuroscientific definition, they don't even know how to find a mind, and doesn't look like they're getting anywhere near to finding one, and that's kind of strange, right? And so you'd have that stuff, and you'd be able to counterpose it. Now, I'm not saying that that's the definition of a logical mind, but I think that a logical mind would do that in giving evidence. So please, let's continue the exercise, Kirigami. I think it's a wonderful one. What is a mind? What is a right question? And why do you believe it? What evidence do you have that supports that belief, that makes it worth believing? And why do you need to believe it? If it's true, what's the point of believing? What's the need to believe in anything? I never understood belief. If it's true, why do you need to believe it? Interesting. I think a logical mind might ask that question, but I don't know if I have one or not. Kaizen on Command is in the house. Good to see you. It's been a while. Said you're just getting back into MMM, sorting out your life at the moment, trying to learn card memorization to practice the palace, especially when I'm at work without a phone. Excellent. That's a great place to do that. Cards pack light. Take them anywhere. And I've been doing card magic again a little bit. I haven't been performing it, but like with bass, I've been getting back into playing and memorizing. And I had an interesting thing where I couldn't for the life of me for about 5 minutes remember the final move in Twisting the Aces. And I was just like, what the heck is wrong with my head? I haven't practiced it this long. But it's an interesting experience because the procedural memory is so strong for every move up to the last one. And then I just blanked for 5 minutes, almost like I blanked with that chord earlier. It's such an interesting thing to bump up against what memory really is and what happens when it goes blank. And then do you have strategies? Are you calm? Are you cool? Are you relaxed? What are you going to do? And in this case, I just blanked in just going through this particular routine on my own. But I was wondering, what would I do if I messed that up? Especially, and maybe Christian knows this, Twisting the Aces. Like, what do you do if you blow the last slight in Twisting the Aces? Like, where do you go from there? Interesting. Anyway, I managed to figure out what it was without having to look at a book or something. But man, it was an interesting experience. And it's procedural memory, which we talked about on the previous live stream, by the way, if you want to go back into the catalog of live streams and watch the replay. But great Kaizen on Command. And in the card course, I actually show the variation of Twisting the Aces that I came up with. And I mean, it's very little addition that I added, so I shouldn't even say that I came up with. But I needed to modify it a little bit because I didn't like any of the ways that it was taught. But if you go in there and you check it out, I thought I was going to have to go and watch my own teaching of it because I couldn't for 5 minutes. I just, what the heck is this last move? But I think you're going to love card memorization. It's so powerful, so profound. And for those of you in the masterclass, a couple months ago, I actually updated the card memorization course with some drills, some very simple drills that are, I think, much more profound memory exercise than any app will ever give you. All right, Michael Loftus is in the house. How often should I review my Mind Palace? Thank you for that question. It's the unanswerable question that has no answer because every memory palace is different. Every kind of information that you're going to put in there is different. But here's a general rule of thumb. Dominic O'Brien calls it the rule of 5. I think that's a little bit loose and light. But, let's say you memorize something 5 times the first day minimum. And then he would say, once a day for 5 days, once a week for 5 weeks, once a month for 5 months, that kind of thing. That's if memory serves the way that the rule of 5 works. I would say depends because I memorize some pretty heavy Sanskrit pretty much every day, and that ain't gonna fly. It's got to be more like 5 times the first day and 5 times a day for the next 5 days. And the way that I memorize, I just end up doing it much more than that cumulatively, so we can talk about that at a different time, or there's a previous live stream where I talk about that sort of stuff. But I end up doing it way more, and I overdo it, and I would suggest everybody overdo it until you learn. And then once you get your mnemonic style going for yourself, never be too sure. Always overdo it, over-rehearse it. And over-rehearsal is something that, if memory serves, Scott Young talks about in his new book, Ultra Learning. So it's very, very important. Very important. Thanks for that question, Michael. Let me know if you have any more. And Mr. Space says, review it all the time. Yeah, well, not a bad piece of advice. I mean, what's the point of memorizing it if you're not going to review it often? Maricela says, I agree, learning in the same time, resting, because our mind and bodies need that. Precisely, there is coming an event about doing jewelry that I like too much, and there are possible stations. Great. So, yeah, you can learn, and you can still learn and be restful. You can still produce and be restful. You can do all kinds of things. I really like that about the book Rest. Kirigami says a mind thinks. Okay, so what is thinking? I'm curious how you would define thinking then. And you say the right kind of question leads to the right solutions. Example, as a police aspirant, taking the least amount of assumptions, come to a logical conclusion that it is very close to reality. A logical mind to solve problems. Okay, great. So Kirigami, this is excellent. You've now put it into context. So you're talking about police, right? Well, police don't have right or wrong answers. Police have reference to law, to precedent, legal situations. That's not a right or wrong thing. It can be that some things are right and wrong, but we're not talking about right or wrong in the law. What we're talking about is what the law says and the means and processes by which we adhere to the law. Is the law something that involves logic? Absolutely. But is it always logical? No. And do people who follow the law blindly have a logical mind? I don't think so. You know, one of the things that's so fascinating right now that I watched yesterday was approximately a 42-minute court case where certain platforms, maybe we won't name which one, but they are being brought in front of a court, and they're going through all these things. And it's very, very clear that there are two lawyers who are very logical people, but one is saying there is a right and a wrong here, and the law actually stands in such a position that we can set a new precedent based on some particular precedents about what the nature of the internet is, right? And relate it to certain kinds of cities that actually exist, right? And what a platform is, etc. And obviously, one of those, it's not a right or wrong issue. It's actually dealing with law as such, precedent, case law, and all these sorts of things, and working through it, and then trying to make a case, support your case with evidence from precedent and just from common sense and the way the world works and human behavior and yada, yada, yada. And it's just fascinating stuff. But it's not about the law being logical, right? It's what is the logic in the law relative to all kinds of things in the world that may or may not be logical, may or may not be right or wrong, but then have some characteristics and elements and aspects to it that need to serve the greater good. They need to match previous precedent. They maybe need to set new precedents, etc., etc., etc. And then you have free market economy. You have issues of free speech and expression and all kinds of things. So I'm glad you put it in the context of police, right? Because that's not necessarily about logic. It just touches part of logic. And again, you use this word, right solutions. The right kind of question leads to the right solutions. I've never seen anything to do with the law that has anything to do with right. I would suggest that you go and read a book, Der Prozess, I think it is called in German, often, if not always, translated as The Trial by Franz Kafka. And he shows the weakness of the logic of the law and just how bereft of logic the law can be, particularly those who follow blindly their interpretation of the law. And then there's a polisemy, it's called, just to riff on your police word there. There's a polisemy, spelt differently a little bit, a polisemy of possible interpretations. And in some ways, the problem with law and the problem with the logic, which is not really logical, of the law, is that it opens up too many kinds of interpretations. And polisemy means an abundance of potential interpretations. And so then when we have something that is productive of so many potential interpretations, what we get into is a dilemma. And a dilemma, classically understood, is something where there are many, many, many possible avenues for action, and usually none of them are satisfactory, and yet we must make a decision. We must choose one path, right? And that's what we see playing out all the time. And it's not necessarily about logic or right decisions or anything like that, because right decision means that one person is going to be the beneficiary of an outcome, and another person, in many, many cases, is going to not be the beneficiary and potentially losing, right? So sometimes there are win-wins, but then we get into something that's not about logic. We get into what's called game theory, right? And so game theory is all kinds of counterintuitive sorts of stuff. Negotiation comes into play, and yada, 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 yada. So I really love your question, and I love where you're going, but now we need to go deeper. And I want to know why you think there is such a thing as a right question that leads to a right answer. What would be the evidence of this? I could be totally wrong, what I'm saying. But logical, I think that it's not even logical to think that there are such things as logical conclusions. There may be conclusions, but what would be logical about a conclusion? What do we mean by conclusion? And we can go to the nth degree and break down the meaning and make everything meaningless, but I don't mean to do that, and I certainly don't mean to destroy common sense. But at the end of the day, there's a beauty in the law, and it's probably the most logical thing about the law, is that the law is by design in the most free countries in the world, something that is always yet becoming what it is going to become. Right? It's malleable. They have precedent, but things change. They're open to amendment, right? So what could a logical conclusion possibly be in a situation where we know that things must change and we must make avenues for possible change open to exploration, at least exploration, if not implementation and execution of what it would take to change things. Right? So logical conclusion is not necessarily even a logical way of framing things. So feel free to carry on that discussion if you like. And I really love that discussion very, very much. It's a very important one. But one of the things that we certainly need to acknowledge is that there is a becomingness, I'm not sure what word that I want here, but there's an emergent character to the world, to all kinds of things, and there's a lot of counterintuitives, and there's a lot of things where logic just has no sway. So then the answer to your question is like, what is a logical mind, and how does one develop it? Maybe that's not the right question. Maybe that's just nowhere to go with that, right? But I would suggest you look into game theory and the law, and read Kafka for sure, and read a wide variety of philosophers. Hazard Adams was his name, I think. He has a really great book that just has all kinds of wonderful philosophers that you can read, and it's just beautiful to go through the canon as much as you can. Figure out, oh, this person said that, and here's the rebuttal to that, and yada yada yada, and you just fill your mind with as much as you can, without ever making a fixed decision on what exactly is right or wrong as such, but rather, as Nietzsche would say, you go beyond good and evil, right? You don't accept a binary, you don't accept an off-on or a yes or a no, but rather you recognize the emergent nature of reality, and you see that there are paths and properties that have been set up, but every property must be, by its own nature in an emergent field, malleable to some degree. So one of the ways that you can think about this, and this is why I always get a bit of a kick out of people saying, well, can I make virtual memory palaces? Well, your memory palaces are already virtual, in the same way that the pot on the stove is already virtual. So when you boil water, right, one of the things that's happening there at a very deep level is that this cast iron thing, or whatever it's made out of, is super solid at one level of reality, but you turn the heat on, And it's actually going to become a different thing at that moment in such a way that it actually fuses in some level of the molecular structure of the universe that I'm not really qualified to understand, but I think it's pretty commonly understood at some level that something about that metal needs to change in such a way that it actually changes the water that it's carrying, and then that water changes in such a way that it can then change the thing that is boiling, right? And so it's because things can change that they can change other things. Anyway, pots, boiling water, etc. The ancient Sanskrit stuff talks a lot about that. So it says in the second verse of the Atmabodha, just as chopping wood is the indirect cause and fire is the direct cause of cooking, spiritual practice is the indirect cause, and self-knowledge is the direct cause of liberation, right? And I think that's really interesting because we kind of need to practice in order to have knowledge, right? Of the self or of anything, right? Of the emergent property. If we call the self the emergent thing that is happening right now, then to get knowledge of that, we have to practice, but yet practice is indirect, even though it gives us knowledge or it helps us direct our knowledge. Interesting. We can talk about that a little bit more, but I would look at those traditions as well. Don't forget the great Eastern and Western traditions, whatever you do. All right, let's check in with our chat here. Christian says, granted, as a lifelong improviser, that may be easier for me than others. I've had to do it and review recall daily, if you remember. Right, yeah. So how do you prompt yourself to actually remember to do recall rehearsal? Well, it's easier than it seems. I call it a memory journal, and the memory journal is there, and also the book. And by the way, we will be talking about this book and its secrets in a minute here, but I want to catch up with the chat. And one just simple way to remind yourself to do recall rehearsal is just to have your memory journal visible everywhere, along with the source of whatever it is that you're memorizing. Not buried in an app. Real books, real memory journals that you can't miss. They're big. They're in your face. I love me some big old memory journals. Yeah. I never forget. It's amazing. You think I have a good memory? Well, not necessarily, but I never forget to use my snapshot journal because I can't miss the dang thing. It's the size of a toaster, you know? There's logic there. There's wisdom there. Speaking of logic, it's more like wisdom, though. All right. Louis Lynch is here. Or Louis Lynch. Logical thinking, the discipline of basing your thoughts and conclusions on facts or observed evidence. Yeah, I'd say that's part of it. But what do you do when there is an absence of facts and an absence of evidence? You still could possibly think logically in the absence of those elements. Master Carver, good to see you always. You say, I caught you earlier in this podcast. Isn't logical-minded thinking something with regard for the hierarchy of evidence, like a guidepost? Where does Occam's razor fit into logical deductions? Could Occam's razor be dismissed without regard for the hierarchy of evidence? I'd love to know more about what you mean by hierarchy of evidence. And Occam's razor is something I don't know enough about, but there's the way that we use it in common parlance, and then there's the way that it actually emerged. So let me look more into that. But I don't think Occam's razor is the be all and the end all at all, right? It just can't be. But let's maybe we need to have a live stream just on Occam's razor, because there's actually a lot to it, and it's misused a lot in the same way that a lot of Einstein quotes are misused, and it's interesting. Anyway, I'm not a logistician. And I would recommend people follow someone like Matt Dillahunty from The Atheist Experience if you really want a tour de force of all kinds of logical deduction-like thinking and inference and Occam's razor, etc., and very, very fascinating. Nicolene says, it is ever-evolving. The law changes as society change. Indeed. Thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, in some places, they're very good about making the law changeable. In other places, not so good. But law and logic do not necessarily go together. Kirigami says, I wish I could stay to further discuss the topic of logic, but college calls. Thank you for giving an insight. I'll think more about it. At last, would you recommend a book on logics? You know, I really don't know the book on logic because there's so many of them, and I still don't know exactly what you mean by logic. If you want to learn about, all kinds of syllogisms and all that sort of stuff. Just look up syllogisms. There's many standard texts. But probably one of my favorite in what I would call, or not what I would call, but what is called the analytic philosophical tradition is, I think it's called Better to Never Have Been by David Benatar. So read that. And it's a checkmate book when it comes to all kinds of syllogistic calculations and a forceful argument that takes logic, as I think you may be defining it, to the ends of the universe, so to speak. So yeah, check that out. Hopefully memory serves on that. Mr. Space says, I'm pretty sure all this boiling things relates to the law of thermodynamics, but you're not sure at all, actually. Well, indeed, it certainly boils down to something. Boiling, everything comes down to boiling. All right, let's carry on with the next strategy and this book. So the HPH is the hell, purgatory, heaven memory palace technique, mind palace technique for dealing with mental suffering and thoughts that torture you and make you unhappy. And it's not from this book, but it's suggested from this book. And before I share what this book is, I just want to say I'm not recommending that people buy this book. Okay? Now, I'm not recommending that you buy it, but it's one of those things where if you look it up on Amazon, the buyer or the product description is not exactly what this book is. And so I'm very happy that I got it and I read it, but I'm also a little bit unhappy because it's just, why are they saying these things about it on Amazon when that's not what it is? This is a very specialist, academic, scholarly argument that we went into in great detail because it's very valuable to do so in the mastermind group. And I'll just share one thing that I didn't get to in that group that I think is suggested by this book, but I'm not necessarily recommending this book, and you probably wouldn't see it because you'd be like reading this and you'd be like, where the heck did he get that idea out of here? Because it's one sentence that suggested this. And so get it at your own risk, but I can't really recommend it unless you're super, super interested in some real mental noodling over a historical issue that in no way teaches you anything at all about memory techniques that I can tell, but it might help you. I don't know. But anyway, buyer beware. I'm not recommending this for purchase. And it's called Memory Palaces and Masonic Lodges. And it purports to solve the mystery of the relationship between the Masonic Lodge and the Memory Palace. And now I would say that it does do that, but not in a way that's really going to help you build better memory palaces that I can see in a direct manner. But if you're advanced with this stuff, you're really interested in the history, etc., then you can certainly explore it. But again, I'm interested in this book for some of the technical things that came out of it, and we went through it in the mastermind in great detail, and it was very, very rewarding to do so for technical and historical reasons for those of us who really nerd out on the memory tradition. And I think we pulled out something very, very powerful from it in our time that we spent on it. Now, that stuff aside, here's the thing that happened in my mind is I remembered Northrop Frye. Northrop Frye was a literary critic in Canada, very, very powerful dude, wrote lots of stuff. And man, I've got to reread some of his stuff. He was a cool cat. Anyway, one of the things that he talked about is how important in our minds the structure of heaven, purgatory, and hell has been. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the West or the Eastern tradition. There's some sort of version of above and below in many, many, many cultures. I would not hazard to say that every single culture has this, but many do. And it's not a Christian thing necessarily. It's not this, that, or the other thing. But there's usually some sort of structure of the heavens, the earth, and the underworld in all kinds of traditions. And so there's this one sentence in this book that made me think about that in Northrop Frye's work. And then I thought, I wonder if there isn't a way to use this heaven, purgatory, and hell structure to reduce mental suffering with a mind palace. So, imagine you had a home, and it had, I couldn't find a good picture with a basement visible, but just imagine that swimming pool is in the basement, and you had an upstairs that would be symbolically a heaven or a paradise or whatever. And then you had a main floor that was your purgatory. And then you had a basement that was your hell. And, just to help make that a little bit more evident, there's some words. Heaven, purgatory, hell. Now, do you have to use heaven, purgatory, and hell? No, you can just say above and neutral and below. Whatever it is that you want, right? And what you would say there is you would say, all right, so I'm working on myself. I want to have better mental content. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stock up with some great memories up above, but not just like memories from my past, but I'm going to remember the virtues, the things I want to do good, and the good characteristics of myself, the good characteristics of my community that inspire me, and I'm going to memorize them and I'm going to stick them up there, and they're going to be in heaven. And whenever troubling times come, I'm going to rock and roll my way up there and go through it, recall rehearsal, right? And that, theoretically, I haven't had a chance to practice this, and I may never, because I'm not sure that I particularly need it, but it's an idea that you might want to play around with, especially if you have a 3-story house with a basement. So you put all your good stuff up there. Then on your main level, just have neutral things that you're just chewing through. Well, perhaps like Kirigami, this, that, the other thing, logic, or, am I going to do this with whatever kind of philosophy, or what am I going to do? I'm going to read Nietzsche, or I'm going to read some guys from the island, or whatever. And then all the bad things, the horrible things, you burn them up. You have a hell memory palace where you throw the negative stuff and you burn it up, right? That'd be the idea there. So again, it's suggested in this book. I don't necessarily recommend the book unless you're really interested in history and masonry and all that stuff. But that fused in my mind with Northrop Frye. You can look up Northrop Frye more. He's a real heavy-duty cat. I like that guy's stuff. And you'd learn a lot from him. Sammy Ice is here from Amsterdam. Interesting topic. Just tuning in. We'll watch it from the beginning ASAP. Great, great, great. Thank you for being here. Always good to see you. If you're just joining us, let me know where you are in the world, what you're doing. Hit the thumbs up. If you're watching the replay, get involved in the discussion below. Always appreciate hearing from you all in the discussion below. I got one more strategy for you. Who here is ready for one final way that a memory palace, a mind palace, the method of Loci, the journey method, the Roman room, the mind castle, whatever you want to call it. Who here is ready for one last technique? Alma Army is in the house, says, do you have ideas to use the mind palace technique to get to a more non-dualistic state? Well, good timing, Sammy, because that's exactly what we're going to talk about right now. Nick says, sounds like something from NLP to deal with internal issues. Yeah, there's an NLP kind of anchoring-esque sort of deal there. This is the extent to which NLP actually exists. I mean, it does in books and stuff. But yeah. I mean, theoretically, you could do the HPH memory palace technique or mind palace technique with your body, right? So you're going to put all the virtuous good stuff up here, and you're going to put undecided here, and then, in the under region, all your negative stuff. But I wouldn't put it on your own body. This is where, you want to deeply consider, do you want to even have negative things in a memory palace? I'm not sure, but it is, again, suggested in one sentence in this book that I'm not necessarily recommending. And I thought that could be a cool thing. And, my friend Ben Fischel, who has projectmonkeymind.com, which you got to check out. He's talked about how it would be really good to help people with emotional healing and so forth. And what do you do when you have negative thoughts? And to Nick's point about NLP, a lot of what NLP people talk about is, okay, so you got this negative thought. Well, can you take it? Can you shrink it? Can you make it small? Can you remove the color from it, make it black and white? What happens if you speed it up and make it like a cartoon, all that stuff? Well, heck, you could do all that stuff and put it in hell, so to speak, a sort of theoretical hell. By the way, there is no hell in reality, as far as we know. And that word, to the best of my research, actually is a place like on the side of the road in Israel somewhere. And it's just the garbage dump. That's what it means. And if you failed to be symbolic to God, you'd just go to the garbage. You'd be just dust. Goodbye. And so you could think of hell that way. You take your thoughts, you squeeze them down, and you just stick them in a place in your memory palace. And so another thing that you could do is Tech. I thought for a second PewDiePie was joining us. Woo! Maybe he is. That's his hidden name. But good to see you here. You actually could do this in a different way. So imagine you had your desktop and you had your little trash bin icon, and this is sort of like a swish technique from NLP, is you could just take all your bad memories, shrink them down, make them really small, make them black and white, and stick them in the trash, and then empty your trash bin. And you know that sound? Like when you empty the trash? I think, let me see if we can actually make that sound right now. Yeah. So if I empty my trash, see, put it on top volume. Am I sure I want to empty the trash? Woo! So imagine that was a bad memory. Now that wasn't a bad memory. That was just a copy of the Brain Games video that didn't work out, that we need to get into this software that we use for the live streaming. So we're not deleting that video. Don't worry. That was the Brain Games attempt to get it up, but it wasn't working for some reason, and I don't know why. Yeah, so that's another version of this that you could try. You're right, Nick. I'm glad you mentioned NLP because they have a lot of stuff like that. Mr. Space says NLP is doing something to the brain. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I learned NLP. I've got one of the certificates. It's just neutral. It's how you use it. All right, we got some clapping. Thank you for being here. AL. Master Carver says, thank you for your humble opinion. I'm on your card training exercises as my gym workout. I did use an app to get the pegs down, though, but as I move along, I see the need for less apps. Okay, great. Yeah, look, I'm never so hostile to apps that people should use them, and if it helps you, great. I just want to know what helped you specifically and why, so that we could maybe help others find good stuff that actually worked, and then say why it worked and how it worked, as opposed to, just sending people off blind, and then if it doesn't work for them, they don't even know why. I mean, that's part of the whole magnetic memory method project, is to help mature learners actually be inspired and educated about how, what, why, and to what extent, and the steps, etc., that are involved in making this stuff work, so that you don't wind up throwing your hands up in frustration because you can't figure it out because someone hasn't, attended to the different kinds of ways that people approach these things and so on. So, but at the end of the day, the goal is always to not need apps. Otherwise, why would you use memory techniques? If the app was the solution, we'd be living in paradise right now. But it's obviously not. And in fact, there's a lot of problems coming from them. More problems than solutions at some level when it comes to learning and memory. And maybe I'm missing something, but we recorded an interview last week with a very interesting young person who's developing a Memory Palace app, and it's already available. And so, you can take a look at it once the episode is released. And wow, I mean, he's on to something. I don't poo-poo it at all. But he himself said, yeah, I mean, it's to train you to get off the app, not to be a prisoner to it and have this pain of connection to it, because that's not the point of memory training. You want to be able to use your memory without any interstitial step. Ooh, I got to do this. No, you want to just memorize and be able to hold it. Boom. That's it. That's the goal. All right. So the next and final strategy for today is to go deep. And this is to Sammy and his question, do I have any sort of suggestions for getting into non-duality? So let's start with your specific question there. I'm curious what you mean by non-duality, a non-dualistic state, Sammy, because I don't think that people are willing to actually accept the implications of what non-duality means. And so we want to work with what you mean by it before we work with what I think it means. I could be wrong, but even the actual texts that talk about non-duality have a real hard time wrapping their minds around the actual implications of what they're saying. Because if what they're saying is true, then we need to take a whole lot of humble pie down the hatch, more than anybody, I think, actually can do if they still have an ego, or at least it's very difficult to do. But if we just take the general idea of what a non-dualistic state is, and we accept that brains are real, what we're really talking about is the parietal, it's the superior parietal lobe, posterior superior parietal lobe, right? This is in the brain. Yeah, that's what it was. The posterior superior parietal lobe. Thank goodness for memory techniques. It's the part in the brain that's sometimes called the orientation association area that helps you understand that this is you and this is not you. So this is me and this mouse is not me. It's in a different area of space. My orientation association area has me over here and that over there. And there are certain meditation techniques you can do that will cause interference with the posterior superior parietal lobe or the orientation association area. Don't you love the jargon? I love that stuff. In other words, you will feel oneness because you were messing with that system. And then you will look in the world and say, well, I'm connected with this. This is me. I feel that it's me. And there's no difference between me and this because everything is one. And I'm connected not only with that, but I'm connected with the entire universe. Now, technically you are, right? Because where else is the universe except for inside of your chemical head, right? Your brain is producing the experience that you have, and everything that you have is happening inside of here. Now, there are things out there that are interacting with this, causing you to have that experience. But if you start to mess around with that area, and I've been messing around with it for a couple of years and having these experiences of non-dualism or non-duality, it seems, if you take science to be real and the brain to be real, that's happening because of the meditation techniques messing with that system. So I'll go out and I'll feel like, oh my God, I'm one with the whole universe. And all my thoughts will disappear and I'll just be, and nothing's happening and everything's just one. And it happens a lot, and there's just, whoa, and it's like you're stoned on drugs. Sam Harris said on his interview with Daniel Kahneman and he called them heroin-level meditation techniques. And it feels like that. I mean, I'm like that most of the time, all day long. And it's great. And it's because of, I'm sure, because I accept that brains are real. I don't know about you. And I'm sure that it's just happening because of this particular kind of meditation messing with that part of the brain. And it messes with other parts of the brain as well, such as the, what's sometimes called the default mode network, and it gets you more into flow, which is the task positive network. Those are some terms that I've memorized, and I'm sure that different scientists use them differently, but that's the basic idea. Scientifically, what you're doing to get into that state of non-duality. Does that make sense, Sammy? Let me know in the chat if you're following the plot so far. And this is how we go deep. We go deep into this. Because if you want to have those experiences that I'm having, and you really want them, here comes a dirty word. It's going to take work. But the best part is that the work can be so blissful, it can be so wonderful and powerful that actually, if you get it into your procedural memory, like we talked about on last week's live stream, go watch that replay if you need to know. You can get it into procedural memory that even if I don't feel like it, I am in my memory palaces. I am doing the stuff. Even today, I didn't feel like going to the gym, and lo and behold, I'm at the gym, and I did my meditation before the live stream because I can't not. I'm so trained to doing it. It becomes a self-generating bliss machine. It's just like a little switch. You hit a tipping point. If you can just get yourself to show up for enough days in a row, the process itself will take over. Now, could something knock me off and have a hard time getting back on the horse? Oh, yes, possibly. But I'm not sure that it would or will if I just continue to show up on autopilot, and I hope to be that way. But I don't know. There's no promises in life, right? And so don't be too sure, don't be too sure, don't be too sure, to give the Gary Halbert quote there. It's important that you say it 3 times. Sammy says, yes, you're following the plot. You're reading the book from Gary Weber, Happiness Beyond Thought. So, Gary Weber, 101. Good that you mentioned him, because I got him ready for us right here. Happiness Beyond Thought. If you want to get beyond thought, you want to be happy and so forth. The number one thing that I think that is maybe a little bit too buried in here, that could be brought out, which is why you sometimes get professors, maybe professors of memory, is that he says, and he makes it so clear, but it's one of those points that you might skip past, is do not try to emulate the journey of any teacher. This is your journey. Now, there are rules that govern the brain, and your brain is going to follow those rules, whether you like it or not. And so you got to get yourself to follow those rules. But one of the major barriers to progress is that if you try to be like the teacher. So I made it very, very early on. I got that point, and I made a dedicated statement that I'm not going to try to have the experience that he talks about having. I'm just going to try to have the experience as I think he describes it as much as possible, and cross-reference that with the experiences of many others. And of course, in this book, he's very good at cross-referencing it with the experiences of many others. And so I highly recommend that you read this book so you can follow the plot. Now, yes, Mr. Space, oh dang, everything takes work. Now, I'm trying to be humorous there a little bit, but it's not work. It's so far from work. It really is. And go listen to that episode of Sam Harris's podcast with Daniel Kahneman. It is heroin level. You just got to get yourself to do it. And I think that what you got to do is go deep. So here's my little formula, and it's exactly what I did, is I defined and designated what the task is going to be, right? And so he pretty much lays it out. He just says, okay, do these stretches, do this breathing, and chant these chants. And I'm skeptical to the nth degree. I still am. It's in my procedural memory, thank goodness. But I thought, okay, I'm going to be a true skeptic. A skeptic says, I don't believe this claim. He's got it as secular as it's going to get, which is great. Scientific-minded, test and see. Go and see. Go to the real thing, do the real thing and see. Next thing you know, 2.5 years later, I'm just sitting in the park and bam, I have no thoughts. Woo! Amazing. So all you got to do is define and designate. So I made it my project to memorize everything that he said that he memorized. And I made it my project to do the stretching and to do the chanting from memory. Bam. So define the project and designate what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. So that's pretty simple, right? It might not be happiness beyond thought for you. It might be some other thing. Whatever it might be. The next step of going deep is establish the routine. So this is about as brain dead simple as it's ever going to get, my friends. First thing in the morning, you sit down and you memorize something and you repeat what it was that you memorized before. I have this great chain. It now takes me, 35 minutes or something to sit there and recite all the stuff that I've memorized. Never missed a day since I started. Not one day. I saw on the Joe Rogan podcast, actually, that Penn Jillette has been meditating, and he said that he's never missed a day since he started either, and it's been approximately about the same amount of time. So I don't know if we're brothers in magic and meditation or what, but anyway, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Sam Harris, I guess, personally told him, meditate, 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 and he just hasn't missed a day. Some people are just in for a penny, in for a pound, and if you're not that way, well, then just make yourself that way by defining the project, designating what it's going to be, what are the steps, what are the pieces, and then establish the routine and just show up and do it, right? Now, there's all kinds of incentives that you can come up with, and we've talked about them on previous live streams, etc. So we don't need to go that much deep into it. I don't mean to make it easier than it is, but if you just get yourself a journal and write down that this is the time, and you make the time, and you establish the routine, then all you have to do is actually show up and do it enough times that your procedural memory takes over, and then you can't not do it. Just like going to the gym, just like, playing music every day, etc. And it's just very, very difficult to not do it if you establish the routine. And what do you got to do? Well, exercise daily. Exercise daily. It's got to be daily. I really will accept no substitute less. Now, some scientific research says that 4 times a week is the minimum to get any effect from meditation. Really, you want to be a 4 times a day kind of guy who lives in non-dual bliss? Or do you want to be an everyday person living in non-dual bliss? I go for daily. I go for it all. In for a penny, in for a pound. So let's rock on. And then you just got to pile on to the practice. So what I discovered is just memorizing what he memorized? No, I think I'll add on some other stuff. So I piled on more, right? And memorized some other stuff outside of it. And I thought, I got to get back into music again. So I started memorizing Bach again, which we saw earlier today. My first attempt at performing it. My performance was so bad, for those of you who weren't here, that nobody asked me to use the live streams to practice performing so I could get the memory of performance going. But that's okay. I don't have any goal to be a performer of Bach anyway. It's just for me and my practice. But thanks for those who humored and had nice, kind words. But that's really, really it. And I'll add a couple of other steps that you might find useful. Diet, sleep, fitness, socialization, having a big vision towards a possible fulfilling outcome. So, you might have to be humble. You might have to start small. You might have to say, well, instead of, I'm going to create a software that every person in the world downloads and has on their machine and it just revolutionizes everything, you might have to just do, one thing that you can do for your neighbor, whatever it is. But have a big vision nonetheless, that it's actually possible, something that's in your skill set that you can actually accomplish, and then build more as you keep going. More big visions, more possible fulfilling outcomes, and grow and get people on your side to help you. Kadisha is here from Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Really like this, but I can grab it really well so far. Really, I would like to know how to apply, for example, in human bones associated effectively. Great, Kadisha. So go to magneticmarymethod.com/YT and learn that technique. If you can follow this, you can follow that course. Make sure you have the memory palaces. And I remember recently somebody told me they memorized 108 bones and the muscle attachments, 108 of them. Amazing. So you can do it too. That's how you would do it. But make sure you actually take the course from beginning to end, and that'll help you out. Anyway, I would very, very much like to get into more of these matters of diet, sleep, fitness, socialization, and having a big vision, etc. But the long and short of it is you also got to go deep, and you have to have daily practice. And so you'd want to pick something to memorize. I got the Upadesa Saram. I got the Ribhu Gita passages. I've got some of the Bhagavad Gita. I've got some of the Atma Bodha. Quoted some of the Atma Bodha today. It is so amazing. I've gone deep on it exactly the way that I described today, and I hope you will too. Maricela says she completely agrees. We are all different, and we can take some things from others to progress. I'm aware about that. I'm responsible of my acts and my thoughts, so I'm trying to be positive. Excellent. So I would just move from trying to having a policy that just says, I am positive, period, and then going deep and figuring out how you can train yourself so it gets into your procedural memory and just happens on autopilot, that positive stuff happens for you. That is what we were talking about today. I hope it helped you out. Nishant asks how to update memory palaces. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but if you'll let me know, we're going to be here for another couple of minutes. Say more about what you mean about updating memory palaces. I will just remind you that we're going to have a new video coming out that involves eggs and how to improve short-term memory, the truth about how to do it. I always appreciate all of you who are the first to jump on there, leave your comments, and hit the thumbs up. So hit the thumbs up now if you haven't already on this live stream. And when this video launches, love to see you there, love to hear what you think. The more people who leave their comments and the more thumbs ups that we get, the more that we can grow this community and the more fun we have on these live streams. I want to thank everybody today for the incredible questions and comments and wonderful camaraderie about the memory tradition. And also remind you, coming up soon, September 21st, 12 noon, PST. Study hacks. You're going to need to be on the email list. And it all starts, if you're not already, at magneticmarymethod.com/YT. You can also just go to magneticmarymethod.com. If you want to be invited, make sure you head on over there and get hooked up with the program. Be part of the community, and love to see you there. This is a special for students. It's a bit of an experiment in terms of how exactly it's going to play out, but you don't want to miss it if you're a student and you want some study hacks. And hey, if you're a lifelong learner, a student, then you're going to want that as well. And I'm really excited for this. It's an opportunity for us to learn together in a way that I don't think the internet has quite seen before. Although there are certainly versions. I wouldn't have been able to think about it if there weren't other versions of this happening. But I'm going to need you to be on the list. So go on over to magneticmarymethod.com/YT to get started and have the basics down. Do the homework exercise in the first lesson of the free course so that you can actually get the most out of the Study Hacks program. Because if you show up and you haven't done that, and that's part of the reasons why we're gating it a little bit here, then, it's just saving data for later. You got to be at least engaged and in action, which may be a high price to pay for some, but it'll be the most rewarding price of all. And you can get started for free at magneticmarymethod.com/YT. If you haven't already, Kadisha, I really recommend that you do, so you can memorize the human bones. If you don't believe that it's possible, go to magneticmarymethod.com/testimonials, and you will see just that story that I shared about 108, if memory serves. All right. Nishant says, if I have a memory palace filled with some information in it, but after some days I want to change it with other information, or rather update the information. And Maricela says, thanks. Thank you, Maricela. Always great to have you here. Nishant, this is called Reusing a Memory Palace. Look up the definitive guide to reusing a memory palace. It's a dedicated video, no interruptions. Maybe YouTube will show you an ad, but other than that, you can have your question answered in full. The definitive guide to reusing a memory palace. Pop it into Google, click the button when you see this face, and hit the thumbs up, leave a comment, any follow-up questions you have. I think you'll be well served by watching that video, as will you all. One last comment here from Sammy. Says, I memorize happy thought and exclude memories that have I, my, or mine in it. So I don't use materialistic memories. Instead, I use memories of good vibes, of good feelings memories. Great. So that's awesome. And if it's working for you, that's great. If it's not leading to a state of non-duality, which you seek, then I would say memorize what Gary Weber says to memorize. And so let's end with what Gary Weber says to memorize. The first suggestion, which is the Upadesa Saram. Karturagniya prapute phalam karma kimparam karma tajadam kriti mahodado patana karanam phalamashashvatam gati nirodhakam ishvarapatam nechaya kritam chitta shodakam mukti sadhakam kaya vangmana karyamuttamam pujanam japash chintanam kramat jagata ishadi yukta sevanam astamarti bird Deva Pujanam Uttamashtavad Ucha Mendataha Chitta Jamjapa Janamuttamam Ajidharya Throta Sasamam Sarala Chintanam Virala Taparam Beda Abanat Sohamitya So Bhavana Bida Pavani Mata Bhava Shunya Sadbhava Sustati Bhavana Balad Bhakti Ruttama Herstalemana Swastata Kriya Bhakti Yoga Bodhashcha Nishtitam Vayurodhana Lina Manasam Jala Pakshivad Rodha Sadhanam. Okay, that's only about half of it, but we'll do the rest a different time. Oh man, Chittavayavas, Chitkriya Yuta, Shaktayodvayi, Shakti Mulaka. That's actually my favorite line. Let me know in the chat. I'll play the outro, and if you let me know, then maybe we'll actually go through this line by line by line by line on a live stream. It's longer than that, but it's very, very powerful. And there's a reason why, Sammy, it will help you get to non-duality, I think, more than anything else will. So memorize it, understand what it's saying, because having it within your head is what makes it happen. So I would remind you of the second verse of the Atma Bodha. Just as chopping wood is the indirect cause and fire is the direct cause of cooking, spiritual practice is the indirect cause and self-knowledge is the direct cause of liberation. And this is a very paradoxical thing, because I had to practice to memorize all that stuff, and I didn't really understand it. I didn't have the knowledge of what it was saying until that I did. And just as with Bach there, and I was talking about it and I was playing it and I said, oh, I lost that chord. Well, what I need to do is actually write it out in order for me to not lose that chord like that again. there is something to having memorized this, but also having written it out that gives you the knowledge. So practice is knowledge. And actually it says on the 5th verse, it says that constant practice, let me see if I can get this here. Constant practice dissolves ignorance like a base dissolves an acid, purifying the individual self. So what that's saying there is that it's weird, right? Like practice is the indirect thing, and yet you need the practice of the self-knowledge in order to dissolve ignorance. So what is ignorance? Well, ignorance is you ignoring the fact that you're already in non-duality right now, Sammy. Right now. This is non-duality. If there is such a thing as non-duality and the implications are true, you're in it right now. Tat vam asi. You are that, right? This is it. And it is it. Actually, if you memorize it, if you actually play through the implications, you'll see it. And you'll wonder why you never saw it before. And then you'll say, well, wait a second. I did see it before. I just didn't see that I was seeing it. So constant practice dissolves ignorance of what's really happening right now, like a base neutralizes an acid, purifying the individual self. So one of the things that's going to happen for you when you memorize this, I'm sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm quite confident that if you just do what he's saying there, you memorize the stuff, you internalize it, you work through it, you use your logical mind and the limits of that logic, so to speak, and you really, really let it play, percolate, become part of you, you will see that you were always already in non-duality all along. And you'll just ask, how the hell did I not see it? And then you'll be free, because that, my friend, is liberation. And what do they really mean by liberation? Well, it appears that liberation actually means not wanting anything other than what you are, what you have in the now. So liberation doesn't mean freedom. It doesn't mean this, that, and the other thing. It's actually just to be free of craving. And this is very, very important to understand. And so they use the word self-inquiry in English, which is vicaria, right? But the problem with that translation is that's not what it means. It doesn't mean self-inquiry. It means self-remembering. And there's actually two kinds. You'll never discover this stuff, I don't think, unless you actually read the Sanskrit and you study the Sanskrit. But there's Atma-vicarya and there's Loka, which is interesting because of Loki, right? In the memory tradition, there's Loka-vicarya. So Atma-vicarya is the remembering of the self that you always already are. Tatvamasi, you are that, right? And living it, never letting it go, always being in it. As Gary Weber says, it's in the task positive network. The brain will actually hold you there if you do the practices and get you out of the default mode network, right? And what is Loki-vicarya? It is remembering the world, the locations, the politics, the la-di-da stuff, which we started with today. And it's not that you have to forget it, but you can either remember the self, the emergent world that you are every minute if you're paying attention to it, or you can remember the stuff that you can't change, the stuff that's just happening, that's going on all the time, the pain, the suffering, the want, the need, the desire, the unmet craving. Or you can just remember that this is it, my friend, and transcend in that awareness and just be whatever it is that you're going to become as you become it, and totally switched on. You can train your brain to do it. And so, yeah, this is awakening. But I think the technical Sanskrit is really very, very helpful in order to do it, insofar that I have done it. Maybe I'm just deluding myself. I don't know. But again, I would bring us back to Sam Harris and his use of that term, heroin level meditation. So it doesn't matter whether it's true or not, as long as it actually produces this wonderful feeling of bliss that is sustained and enduring and doesn't get rocked out when bad things happen and you can get back to it. Well, that was, again, the point of today's live stream. I gave you 3 strategies. We started with something that's so super simple that only a really smart person could talk themselves out of actually doing it. If you're skeptical, search up my name and skeptic, and you'll find a blog post that hopefully will convince you that your skepticism is good. Use it in your favor. Don't talk yourself out of these techniques. They're very, very powerful. The second technique is a bit speculative, coming out of a book that I don't really recommend to anybody unless you're super, super interested and you don't mind, just getting stuff that's really data and historical analysis and people quibbling over something that, yeah, who am I to say? You're a responsible individual, but I'm not recommending it in any dedicated way. And so, yeah, we talk about this all the time. I don't see any point of memory techniques really other than to memorize information that improves your life. If you really want to improve your life, you might as well go for gold. It's all right in here, and we'll sing it again in the future. And Sammy says he would like to have an analysis of it. So maybe what we can do is go through this together and answer Master Carver's question. So I'm not sure what you heard. Chittamani, I don't remember saying that, but Chaitanyam is in there, and Chaitanya, and all kinds of different things. And really, chit is like the mind or awareness, and it's used for thought, and it's used all kinds of things. So you would have heard in that chanting many, many variations on it. And there's like Sat Chit Ananda, which is, like awareness, consciousness, bliss, and so forth. But it's not what the way that it's translated into English is not really what bliss means. You want to have your mind free of craving. So Adi Shankaracharya starts the Atmabodha with, I am composing this treatise on self-knowledge for those who are purified and peaceful, free, calm of mind, free of craving, and desirous of liberation. And so really, part of what the Sanskrit is trying to convince you of and help you see, not really to convince you of, but help you experience in a way that is true for you and that you have verified it in a way that's useful for you, is that you don't even have a mind. There is no you, right? There's just stuff going on. And you're like a witness to these things that gets involved in the idea that your mind is real. And this is kind of puzzling because of course it's real, right? We just sat on a live stream for the last 2 hours, and we had all kinds of thoughts and all kinds of things. But the reality is it's all happening so fast, and the instant that it's here, it's already gone. Right? And so the realness of it is the extent to which you are switched on in the moment, enjoying the ride right now without a bunch of stuff interrupting you. And so why I say that you're going to realize that it was happening to you all the time anyway, you just didn't see it, is like, when else were you in the world and totally involved in the world? Even when you're lost in thought. Even being lost in thought is totally there, right? And so you learn to just be a little bit more forgiving about when your mind wanders, because there's no mind to wander. You just think you have a mind. You've been hypnotized by society to think that you have a mind, but really all that you're having is an experience that you've been trained to have through society that is nothing more than what is happening at any given moment. And the quality of it is really how free you are from suffering. And suffering is created when you want anything other than what is right now. So that's the practice. It's really great. It's amazing. I'm pretty sure that one of the best things you can do to get there and switch on that, as Sam Harris put it, heroin level meditation techniques is in this book. It's why I promote it so much. I've even written a book which is essentially a large explanation of what it is that this book did for me, and it will come out eventually, and it's going to be what it is, and I'm enjoying every minute of working on it. And so let's do that in the future. Sammy Ice, we will do a walkthrough of the Upadesa Saram line by line and talk about it and why that memorizing exactly what it says might just help you out. And then if I can encourage you to do it, all you got to do is go to magneticmarionmethod.com/YT, get the free course, and then I'll be able to invite you to Study Hacks when it's ready, which will be very soon. All right. So, Sammy recommends Biology of Desire from Mark Lewis. Excellent. And Mr. Space says, sounds really profound. It is, but here's the thing. It's just totally ordinary awareness, as James Swartz always points out. Not extraordinary at all. Not particularly profound. It's just what's happening right now. If you have a brain that is trained to recognize it So again, thank you everybody for being here today. I hope you enjoyed the 3 paths to reducing mental suffering that we shared today. Please take it seriously, even if you have no mental suffering, which, by the way, if that's true, congratulations. I still have a little bit from time to time. We talked about that a little bit today. So if you missed anything and you want to catch up with it, please do check out the replay. Leave any comments that you have about the replay on the discussion page. There's oodles of links for you down in the link swamp below. And I share some of the things that I've gone through, like memory palaces that I never was able to use because of some hellish torment that went on inside of them. And I invite you to go through those links if you're interested in more. And Nishant, please make sure you go through the definitive guide to reusing a memory palace. It is the answer to your question. Anybody's free to go through that, search it up. Look for the picture of this guy, insofar as he exists. And there you go. Maricela, I think you've ended this with the perfect statement. Thank you so much for saying that. The present is a gift. And on that note, a book recommendation, look up Lewis Hyde's The Gift. Please read that book, please, and recommend that others do as well. Nicolene, one last question before we go. Can a child benefit with doing the masterclass at age 13? Nicolene, thank you for asking that. We know that other people have been able to help their kids, and age 10 is typically the youngest age that we've seen in the magnetic memory method world. My suggestion would be is that you do it for yourself first. You get the benefit first, and then you encourage the 13-year-old, even if it takes until they're 14, to see the wisdom, see the benefit, and see your enthusiasm because it's working for you, as opposed to anything where you would force it on a young person. Just think about a young person going to Kung Fu who didn't want the masterful moves, or going to learn sword fighting or fencing or whatever, that had no interest, or forcing a kid to play piano. That's the answer to the question. So yeah, there'd be benefit, but you don't want the benefit to make that child hate you because you're forcing them to do something they're just not interested in. They don't want to do. But if you were to do it for yourself and live the amazing outcomes that come from having what we talked about today with going deep, I'll bet you that kid will have a hard time not wanting to at least give it a try and benefit from the try, because we know that people who even just show up and go through a training will benefit from having the idea. Harry Lorraine has made the audacious claim that I think is very, very true, is that once you know that memory techniques exist, you can't unknow it. And so you'll come to them eventually to give it a try. But you need to actually have some sense of the miracle. You need to essentially believe, so to speak, that it's actually going to work for you, even though I don't like that word belief. But you need the evidence. You need to have some faith that you can do it too. And what better gift could a parent give than to stand in front of a kid and do what Paul can do? And he's an incredible person. And so let's end it for today. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. And I'll show you Paul demonstrating to others, and just notice how much joy and bliss is coming from this, and do that for your child. And I think your child will find it very, very difficult not to do it for themselves. Thank you, Mr. Space, for your kind words. Can't wait to see you guys and everybody on the next live stream. Please share these videos around, and it's just an honor and a blessing to serve. And I can't wait to serve you again. Thank you. Thank you. And until we speak again, come visit me at magneticmarymethod.com/YT. Get the free course if you haven't already. Just come visit the site and take it away, Paul. Until we speak again, keep yourself magnetic. Bye-bye.
384626 4338 3279 5028 84 1971 69 399375.
Hi, my name is Paul, and I've taken a few courses by Anthony Metivier, but I felt that the experience of doing it today live was the biggest advantage. Anthony has a gift in simplifying complex concepts, and I feel that I've really come away today with practical skills that I can now use effectively. It was great to immerse ourselves in the situation, to be able to apply the time, because when we're at home we may not take the time to do the memory exercises that we were doing today. I felt particularly that the thing that we did at the end of today was something that is totally unique in memory training, which is 3 days of memory, which is how to practice your skills. I've read many memory books and I've never come across a system laid out as to how to practice what you've learned, and this is what I gained today from Anthony's course. So I'd give it 10 out of 10. Thank you.
53 42 1170 679.